My Aunt Gloria didn't even wait for me to sit down. I was still standing at the edge of the table, graduation cap in my hand, gown still on my back, when she looked up from her plate and said it loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. A degree in what? Baby photography? Honey, even the babies won't hire you. The table erupted. Every single person laughed. My cousins, my uncle, my brother's girlfriend. I looked at my mother. She smiled into her napkin. Nobody said a word in my defense. Not one person. I stood there in that gown, holding a cap I had worked 4 years to earn, and I felt something inside me go completely still. Not broken, still, like the moment before a decision gets made. That was the night I stopped explaining myself and started building something they would never see coming. My name is Delaney. I'm 34 years old, and this is my story. I studied visual communications and UX design at a mid-sized state school in Ohio. I know what you're thinking because my family thought it too. They thought it was a hobby with a diploma attached. My uncle called it computer art. My mother called it her creative thing. My brother, the one they always praised, the prized child who went straight to law school on a partial scholarship, never called it anything at all. He just smiled the way people smile when they've already decided you don't matter. Growing up, we weren't rich. My dad worked a factory job during the week and drove for a delivery service on weekends. My mom kept the house together and made sure my brother had everything he needed for his future. I'm not saying she was a bad mother. I'm saying there was a direction in that house and it didn't point at me. I paid for my own degree. Pell Grants, tips from waitressing Thursday through Sunday for 3 years straight, one small academic scholarship that no one in my family ever mentioned or congratulated me for. I drove a 2009 Honda Civic with a crack running across the dashboard that I covered with a strip of black electrical tape. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't the one they introduced first at family gatherings, but I had something none of them knew about yet. I was quietly, almost obsessively, building things online. Late nights, early mornings, every spare hour between shifts and classes. I was learning, experimenting, creating. They saw a girl with a craft degree and a used car. They had no idea what I had already started. And listen, if someone in your life told you your dream wasn't practical enough, that your passion wasn't a real career, that you should have chosen something safer, something more serious, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now and tell me about it in the comments. You are exactly who this community was built for. Click hype and let's keep going. 3 weeks after graduation, my family held a dinner. They called it a celebration. I want to be honest about what it actually was. It was a celebration for my brother's first full year at his law firm. His name was in the group chat subject line. The message from my mom read, "Dinner for Daniel's big year." Oh, and Delaney finished school too, so that's great. Oh, and Delaney finished school too. I showed up anyway. I don't know why, maybe I still believed it could be different. My uncle pulled out his phone before the appetizers arrived. He had Googled my degree. I watched him squint at his screen and then look up at me with this expression, this mixture of confusion and amusement. UX design, he said slowly, like he was reading a foreign language. So you draw buttons for websites? My mother laughed. It was soft, almost apologetic, but it was a laugh. She said she's always been the creative one, and the way she said it, I knew exactly what she meant. She meant I was the one who wouldn't amount to much. She meant it was a nice quality, creativity, like being good at watercolors or knowing all the words to old songs. Charming, harmless, unprofitable. My brother didn't say anything cruel. He did something that hurt more. He leaned toward his girlfriend, voice low but not low enough, and said, "She'll figure it out eventually." I heard every word. I excused myself to the bathroom. I needed 30 seconds to breathe. I pushed open the door, stood at the sink, and looked at myself in the mirror. Then my phone buzzed. It was a Stripe notification. $4,300. Deposited. A freelance UX client I had been working with for 2 months had just paid the final invoice on our project. It was the largest single payment I had received in the 8 months since I quietly launched my freelance business. 8 months of working in near total secrecy while I finished my last semester of school. I stood in that bathroom in a family restaurant, reading that notification 3 times. Then I walked back to the table, sat down, picked up my fork, and smiled. I said nothing. 2 months after that dinner, I found out through Instagram. My cousin posted a story. It was a photo of my mom's kitchen table covered in notebooks and printed spreadsheets, and the caption said, "Family Business Brainstorm Night." Everyone was there. My brother, his girlfriend, my Aunt Gloria, my uncle, 2 cousins. They were helping Daniel plan a legal document prep side business he wanted to launch. I had not been invited. I had not been called. I had not even been mentioned. When I asked my mother about it, she paused for a moment and then said, "We just didn't think it was your kind of thing, baby." My kind of thing. I designed digital products for a living, but sure, a business meeting wasn't my kind of thing. I let it go. I wrote it down. 4th of July, my aunt's backyard, the smell of charcoal and sunscreen and warm concrete. A family friend named Rochelle, someone I had only met twice, started asking everyone what they did for work. Daniel answered first, confident, clear, the way he always spoke, like the room was already listening. His girlfriend talked about her marketing job. My cousins gave their answers. Then Rochelle looked at me. Before I could open my mouth, my Aunt Gloria jumped in. She does something on the computer, freelance stuff. You know how it goes. Some months are good, some months not so great. She tilted her head a little, sympathetic, like she was describing someone going through a rough patch. Rochelle nodded slowly. Several people at that table nodded. That nod that says, "Oh, she's still figuring it out." My revenue that month was $9,200. I smiled. I ate my potato salad. I said nothing. August brought a phone call from my mother. She had that bright, helpful voice she used when she thought she was doing me a favor. "I told my friend Karen that you'd design her a logo and a little website," she said. "She needs it for her cleaning business. I figured you could use the portfolio piece, right?" I asked if Karen had a budget. Silence. "Delaney, I told her it would be free. She's family friends. I thought you'd want to help." I explained, calmly, that I charged professional rates for professional work, that my time had a value, that doing free work for someone I didn't know was not something I was willing to do. My mother was genuinely hurt. I could hear it in her breathing. "I just thought you'd want to help the family," she said. I didn't get an apology. I got a label. My cousin told me later that the family group chat had a whole thread about it. The word they used was difficult. I stopped going to events that felt like performances. I stopped showing up to be managed or minimized or explained away. I took every hour I had been spending on family obligation and I put it into my work. I got sharper. I got faster. I got better. Every time they underestimated me, I got quieter and I got sharper. But here is what none of them knew. For 2 years, I had been running a blog, anonymous, completely separate from my freelance work and my real name. I called it Invisible Output. It was written for UX designers and creative freelancers who were building independent careers, people working without a safety net, without a family cheerleading section, without anyone handing them a head start. By the time that summer ended, Invisible Output had 110,000 monthly readers. It had been featured in 2 major industry newsletters. I ran a paid membership community inside it with 600 paying subscribers. My brother's girlfriend, who worked in marketing, had mentioned the blog at the dinner table twice. She called it actually really smart content and said she shared it with her team. She had no idea that the person who wrote every single word of it was sitting 3 feet away from her, being talked over and laughed at and described as someone who did stuff on the computer. What they didn't know was that while they were laughing at my degree, tens of thousands of people were paying attention to exactly what I had to say, and it was getting bigger. A podcast producer had reached out about a guest series. A small publishing house had sent an email asking if I had ever considered turning the blog into a book. I hadn't said yes yet. I was waiting for the right moment. Her name was Sandra, 52 years old. She ran a boutique digital agency out of Atlanta and had more than 20 years in UX leadership. I met her at a virtual conference 2 years earlier, almost by accident. We ended up in a breakout session together and stayed in touch. She had been watching my freelance work grow, and she had been reading Invisible Output, though she didn't know I wrote it. Not yet. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon in September. Her voice was direct and warm at the same time, the voice of someone who doesn't waste sentences. I want you to come on as creative lead for a rebranding project. 6 months, $38,000. You'd be running the visual and UX strategy for the whole campaign. I sat very still at my desk. She kept talking. You've been underpricing yourself and under-announcing yourself. That ends now. I signed the contract 4 days later. Meanwhile, the family's tone was shifting, though they didn't know why. Daniel's side business was struggling. He had expanded too quickly, taken on overhead he couldn't justify, and lost 2 of his early clients within the same month. The stress was showing up in small ways at family gatherings, shorter answers, less eye contact. But the public story hadn't changed. The family was still calling it a tough first quarter. My mother was still talking about Daniel's vision and his resilience. Nobody had revised the narrative. She called me on a Wednesday evening. I was at my desk with Sandra's contract open on one monitor and 3 client deliverables open on the other. "Your brother is really doing something real," my mother said. "I just hope you find your footing soon, baby. I worry about you." She had no idea. I looked at the contract on my screen. $38,000. I looked at the invisible output dashboard in the background. 112,000 readers that week, a new high. "I'm okay, Mom," I said. "I promise." The dinner was at an Italian restaurant downtown. Nice enough, not fancy, the kind of place families go when they want to feel like they're celebrating without spending too much. It was framed as a celebration of Daniel's law firm anniversary. I was invited, but the invitation came through my cousin, not directly from my mother, which told me everything I needed to know about how optional my presence was. I went anyway. I wore something simple. I was calm. The conversation moved the way those conversations always move at family events. Money, career, who was doing what and how well. Daniel's firm partner, a tall man named Philip, who clearly enjoyed the sound of his own voice, praised Daniel for his work ethic and his client retention. The table raised glasses. My aunt smiled like she had personally built him. Then my uncle turned to me. He had that look, the familiar one. "So, Delaney," he said, "still doing the little website things? Anything steady yet?" The table got a little quieter. A few people glanced over. My phone buzzed on the table beside my water glass. I looked down. It was Sandra. I didn't answer. I just placed the phone face up where everyone could see the name on the screen, and I let it sit there. Then I looked at my uncle, and I said, calmly, "Actually, I just closed a $38,000 contract, 6 months, creative lead for a full agency rebranding project." The air in that corner of the restaurant changed. I felt it, that specific silence that happens when people are recalculating. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Daniel's girlfriend, her name was Priya, started scrolling on her phone. I noticed, but I didn't react. And then Sandra walked in. She was there for a separate meeting at the restaurant bar, a coincidence I had mentioned to her earlier in the week when she said she'd be in town. She spotted me and came over to say hello, completely unaware of the family geography she was walking into. I introduced her around the table. She was gracious, easy, the kind of person who takes up exactly the right amount of space. She looked at me and said, "Your blog got cited in 2 separate industry reports this quarter. I keep telling people to pay attention to what you're building." Priya's head came up from her phone. She turned the screen around slowly. It was the invisible output homepage. Her voice was quiet, almost careful. "Wait," she said. "This is you?" The table looked at her, then at me, then at the screen. I didn't perform anything. I didn't smile wide or cross my arms or make a speech. I just said, "I've been building it for 2 years. I just didn't think anyone here was interested." My mother's mouth opened. She looked like she was searching for the right response and couldn't locate one. I looked at her. My voice was quiet, not angry, not dramatic, just clear. "Mom, I love you, but you told me I'd never find my footing. I found it a long time ago. You just weren't watching." I finished my dinner. That part matters. I didn't make a scene or walk out or let the moment become a performance. I ate. I said polite goodbyes. I drove home in my car, the new one, the one I bought 8 months ago and hadn't mentioned to anyone. The calls started within a few weeks. Daniel's side business had hit a wall it couldn't climb over. My mother called first, asking if I could give him some advice. Then a cousin called to say Daniel was having a hard time and the family was worried. Then Daniel called himself. He needed $6,000, operational costs. He was trying to buy himself time to restructure. I listened to the whole thing. I didn't interrupt. Then I said, "Let me think about it." And I actually did think about it, because I'm not cruel. I don't want to be the person who lets someone fall just to prove a point. That's not who I am, and it's not who I want to become. But the answer was no. Not because I couldn't, because giving money to someone who has never respected your work doesn't help them grow. It just delays the lesson. What I did instead was send him a list, a real one, small business resource programs in our state, a free SCORE mentorship program, 2 books I actually recommend, a contact name at a nonprofit that helps new businesses restructure. I gave him tools. I didn't give him a check.
Then I turned back to my own next chapter. The publishing house and I signed a letter of intent for the book. Sandra's project was 2 months in and running ahead of schedule. And one afternoon in October, I sat in a title company office and signed the paperwork on my first home. Not an apartment, a house, in a neighborhood I chose, in a city I love, bought with money I built from scratch, while my family laughed at my degree. They spent years waiting for me to fail loudly. I just kept winning quietly until I didn't have to be quiet anymore. Did someone in your life tell you your dream wasn't serious enough, that your degree was a waste, that your passion wasn't a real career, that you should have chosen something safer and more predictable? I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you are in the journey, whether you're just starting or whether you've already proven them wrong. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next in this community, and click hype to help this story reach every single person who was ever told their path didn't count. Standing up for yourself when the people who are supposed to believe in you are the ones doubting you, that is one of the hardest things a person can do. If Delaney's story felt familiar, if any part of it hit close to home, subscribe and become part of this community. Every hype you give this video helps it travel further and reach someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me where you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories go.